Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hi, all. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Go ahead and change your name. We're focusing this year on connection. And so go ahead and change your name. See how my name is. I'm not LeGrand, Oregon. Put where you're from and then your name after that, because otherwise sometimes it'll drop off as we get bigger and bigger. Our screens will get our little visuals will get smaller. So, okay, here we go. This is my new friend, Jay Hobbs. Have you guys heard of him?
We can't hear it.
Oh, you can't hear it?
That's okay, Becky. You can keep dancing by yourself. It's pretty.
I know, I'm just over here. How can you not hear it? Can you hear it now?
No.
It's
Just mimic your moves.
Yeah, Zoom has done a phenomenal job of blocking out noise all around. And so unless you're connected and bringing it in through, so there's a Zoom app. If you click on app, Becky, that will get music that way. That'll come through. It may not be as good as yours though. Let's see if I put one in.
Oh, I can search it?
Yeah, like.
Okay, this is learning. Anybody else want to use music? See, this is learning.
So like
there's only a handful of you here. Okay, under app and then what?
Here you go. Can you hear that now?
Well, I can hear my music.
So this is, if you go in on anybody's Zoom and you click the app icon at the bottom, one of the apps is music. And then when you click on music, it'll give you all different kinds. Like I just picked club vibes, but there's also kind of lower, like, meditative, blah, blah, blah music. So, and when you do it this way, it comes through the Zoom so everybody can hear it.
Okay, this is just mind blowing over here. Where's my mind blowing reaction down here? That is so great. That is like tip of the day.
Kind of fun.
So have you tried all the music yet, Gary? All the different.
I did only because I run a conference, an Agile conference, and it's virtual and there's a lot of breaks, gives people time to get up. And so I try all the different, club vibes. I can't remember some of the others, but there's like, what are the ones that have good happy hour,
High energy. Let's rock. But see, I kind of like when I can use my own because there's certain people that I like, but this is fun. So fun. Okay.
You want to try it? I can pause it and you can pick.
I don't know. Okay, go ahead. Chill and chat. Let's see what that is. Who's feeling chill and chatty? Can you hear it?
Yeah.
This is chill and chat. If you're just joining us, Mariana, we are learning how to add music to Zoom. Did you already know? That's crazy. You go to the apps and there's music. You click on it and then it's got like all of these different ones. This is crazy. Okay, now chill and chat is a little too chill for me. We gotta like, how about, I saw one earlier. How about this one? High energy.
Nice.
How you can't control the sound?
Well, you can only go so high, and in a way that's sort of nice because then you don't want to blow everybody out of the water. But
oh, way to add energy to your group. So fun. And then there's like a whole playlist. This is mind blowing. We're so cutting edge, people. So cutting edge. Love it. All right. Well, it is 11:05, so we could play with this all day, but that's not what we're here for. So go ahead. Everybody got their name changed. Mariana, we were changing our name to show our location. Show us where you're from, darling. All right, I will pause the music and we will turn it over to our president, Jen.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us for another monthly event, which is going to be fabulous. We've got some informational stuff for the group, so let me go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully everyone's seeing a welcome slide. Is that correct? Okay, seeing thumbs up. Awesome. So again, kind of a little quote to kick us off for the month of April. Now, April is a promise that May is bound to keep. As we dive into our announcements for this time, we're going to kick things off. It is coming up for our chapter that we will see our ICF High Country Board switch over, and we've got some open positions. So if you're curious about joining the board, want to make an impact, this is a fabulous time to do that. We are in a great midst of growth and expansion, just as a chapter, and a lot of great energy is happening around the things we're doing, and we're trying to incorporate a lot of new things for our members. So as always, I will drop this PowerPoint into our chat after I get done. At the very bottom, you'll see that fill out application. We've got a handful of openings at this current time. So we're looking for our next vice president. We're looking for a secretary, marketing chair, a membership co-chair, and a DIB chair. So that little application will allow you to indicate kind of your interests and what role you might be interested in. And we're going to start reaching out to folks and just start having conversations, essentially. So this is a great way to get on our list so we can reach out and chat with you more about the position that you might be interested, or even if you're just open and curious. Great opportunity. And further news as far as High Country goes, International Coaching Week is coming up pretty fast and furious on us, May 13th through the 19th. And I've got some highlights here about what we'll be doing during that week as a chapter. So May 13th from noon to 1 Mountain Time, we're going to be having a wonderful experience with Monica Reynolds. And then on Wednesday, May 15th, again, we're going to be having a wonderful experience with Jen Marr. And these are kind of the topics that they'll be covering. We're also offering pro bono coaching, not only through International Coaching Week, but even starting before that. So if you're wanting to jump into that pro bono coaching and just allow people to have the gift of coaching and experience it, feel free to contact any of the board members, specifically who is kind of spearheading our week. Our coaching week is Carrie, who is on the call here. So she is probably the best person to reach out to, but any one of us on the board would be more than happy to answer any questions for you and help you get set up, especially with that pro bono coaching aspect. As we still a few more things for High Country here. Our monthly coaching connects. You've probably seen advertisements for those come out in various ways, not only on our website, but also through our newsletter. And that's a nice little plug for our newsletter. We send out a monthly newsletter with wonderful information in it. If you're not receiving that, feel free to reach out again to the board and we will be able to put you on that list so you can start receiving those. I will also put my email in the chat as well once I put this presentation in there. So you can reach out to me and we'll get you all set up with the newsletter. But the newsletter is one place to see the monthly Coach Connects and get rolling with those. You might have seen it also on LinkedIn as well. Same thing with our International Coaching Week activities. You may see those coming up on LinkedIn as well. And to switch on over to global news, Global's doing a wide variety of things. So, they are redoing their credentialing series. They're really focusing that to be on the learning platform. So basically, if you log into your ICF account, you'll be able to get into the learning portal that way and find the credentialing series. Great information about just the credentialing process, the exam that has been revamped, and all sorts of different things tied to credentialing. So I highly recommend it. If you're looking to get more involved with ICF Global, the communities of practice are a great way to do that. They're always putting on wonderful events, various topics, and a lot of different groups. So something to strike everyone's fancy, essentially. We've got updated credentialing candidate guidelines now available. Hyperlinked that for everyone. So if you're curious about that, you'll have an opportunity to click on that and explore more. Converge, which is ICF Global's huge conference that they hold every other year. The recordings are on demand at this point in time, and we are eager to see what they've got cooking up for 2025. Wonderful, DEIB news. ICF is always putting out and always engaged in that corner of the world. So that is a fabulous link to check out. And then they've got the 2024 ICF Coaching Impact Award nominations. Those are open. They're going to be open till April 26th, basically at midnight Eastern time. So you can click on there and nominate to your heart's content. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Becky to introduce our fabulous speaker for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jen. One more thing, I'm going to have to drop in the chat. I don't remember if I had mentioned this in the beginning, the best way to connect with you. So make sure that you get that in there before. And then we are going to be saving the chat and at the end of the program, so you don't have to frantically go through that, and we can actually fully listen to Lisa, clear off the space, drop that in the chat, and then we'll refocus on Lisa. Make sure you grab a pen and some piece of paper. She asked really great questions, so I can guarantee that you're going to want to be able to jot some of those down and be able to share your insights as we get started. For this event, if you complete the whole event, there are continuing education credits, 1 core competency, and a half credit for resource development. And at the end, again, there'll be another link for the survey and to be able to get your certificate for those. Again, just as a reminder, I will drop the chat, the whole chat, the save chat in the chat as soon as we're done, so that you don't have to worry about grabbing all of those links and remembering all the stuff. Then you can pull it up at your leisure to be able to grab whatever you need to out of that, including those links that Jen is posting in there. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa Ong. She is my friend, co-laborer. She's a mastermind guru. We have had a lot of intersections in life. If you don't have a business building besties group, that would probably be one of our biggest things, is like getting a group of people that are learning new things, that share ideas, that are really growth minded. And she is really great about gathering those people around the table. So we're excited to hear from you, Lisa. There's a ton, and hopefully she'll go into more about her background as she gets started. So over to you, Lisa.
Thank you. Now, I lost the slide, so my apologies. I switched over to copy my LinkedIn for you and I forgot the slides. Let's try again. All right, here we go. Let's start at the beginning. All right. Let's see, here we go from the beginning. All right, now we're ready to go. So I welcome everyone on this fabulous Friday. I said I would give you 3 strategies for growing our coaching competency with a cross-cultural lens. My wish is that you take away at least 1, but I'm going to give you more than 3 because that's a bonus. My company's called Wishing Out Loud because it's my registered coaching trademark. Over years of coaching individuals, they would tell me, Lisa, I'm frustrated. Why am I getting passed over for promotion? Why am I not getting stretch opportunities? And I'm like, why are you wishing out loud with me versus investing in meaningful relationships with people who can actually grant the wish? And many times they feel like, I don't want to be bossy or demanding, right? Maybe I'm not good enough to be asking for these things. And I said, but if you've invested in the relationship and they really know who you are, what you're about, and where you're headed, it actually gives them an opportunity to grant the wish and feel good. It's a different way of reframing it. So when DEIB started becoming popular in the ICF, I just smiled because I've been doing this for years. I was doing it before there was a B in belonging, because I know that after years of doing this, not everyone understands what diversity, equity, and inclusion is, but they know what it feels like not to belong. So all the work that I do is all around coaching, coaching with a cross cultural lens, and creating inclusive leadership and belonging. It's all culture work. And someone's like, how do you do it? And I do it through the power of stories, right? Some people call them icebreakers, but being curious, particularly in things that are beyond surface level. So just like we started today's meeting, I always start meetings with music, right? Get people in the mood, but different types of music. And also an icebreaker question or an energizer. Some people don't like the word icebreaker. So I like the origin stories question, like, where did you get your name from? Sometimes people have a story behind that. Do you even know the origin of your name? I didn't. I knew my Chinese name was Precious Pearl. In Chinese, it's pronounced Bogun in Cantonese. And my grandmother had given it to me. It's a tradition in the Chinese culture. You give your grandchildren um, a Chinese name that's kind of aspirational. And I was like, Precious Pearl? She's like, pearls are created under extreme pressure, but they have to shine. I was like, oh, okay, that's my aspiration. But I'm like, Mom, Dad, why did you name me Lisa? I never knew that, well, the origin of my English name. And my mom laughed and she said, your dad was a fan of Elvis Presley. And so when they named their daughter Lisa Marie, that was good enough for them. And I was laughing. I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I wasn't a boy or I would have been named Elvis. But how do you feel about your name? It evokes energy when you connect people across your name origin. And then once you've got that initial icebreaker, I always get more curious. So I go a little deeper, right? When did you feel like you belong the most? If they can anchor, kind of like appreciative inquiry, if they can anchor on an example of a place or an experience where they had a strong sense of belonging, then we can know what we're aiming for, right? What was the ingredients that made up that strong sense of belonging? And it may be different for each and every one of us. I hear a lot of people say, well, this is a safe space. Let's create a safe space. And I always caution them because just like belonging, safety and psychological safety is different for each and every person. So simply because I said we're holding a call and it's a safe space, and that's my intention, it doesn't always make it safe for others, right? And just like we do in our initial coaching conversations, I always ask my clients, okay, what do you want to discuss? But what are the things you don't want to discuss? Like, what are your non discussable so I don't accidentally step in it? And I had one client, he never talked about his family, and I was really curious about it. But I remembered in our early first coaching session, he said he had a nasty divorce, an ex-wife, and it was actually activating for him, or accidentally activating to go back to that. So he never talked about his family, and I didn't press there. And then lastly, another question I like to ask, what was it about the environment that made you feel included and seen? Sometimes people can't describe that. So then you just flip the question. Coaches are great with questions, right? So I'm like, well, tell me about a time where you didn't feel like you belong, right? You felt excluded. What were all the small things that signaled to you that you were not welcome, right? Maybe you were just being tolerated, or they weren't going the extra mile to make you feel welcome. And they can usually name those much faster. So that's kind of just the premise to warm you up. And you can tell I'm a storyteller, so Becky and Carrie are going to keep me honest on the time. But you can interrupt me as much as you can. Because I'm sharing my screen, I'm not sure if I can see the chat at the same time. But what I wanted to cover today is just, what did we hope to achieve today? How does this tie back to ICF and their core values and the core competencies and the way we work. It's embedded, which I love. It's not something separate. It's just how we show up, and it's the intention and the energy we bring. And then I'll give you a lot of tools that you can use that have been pretty well used by a lot of my clients, and they find it very helpful. But I'll demonstrate with you how I use them so you can use them. I like to say we're all multidimensional. It's a nice way of saying diversity. I do DEI in Texas, and so I get a lot of bless your hearts, right? But if I talk about multidimensional inclusivity, it really is DEI. It's just not saying a word that might accidentally activate someone. I say accidentally activate instead of trigger because trigger triggers people too. Um, and then I'll give you a tool on culture patterns because I can't teach you everything you need to know about every culture, but it'll give you a way to amp up how you see the world so that you can start to get curious about, what's in their culture, what's in their education, what's in their lived experience that might be leading to that particular behavior or belief. And then I'm a little bit of a tiger mom, so I'm always giving people optional homework or extra resources. So I will load you up with extra resources that we don't have time to cover today. And because my company is called Wishing Out Loud, and I do love country music, my wish for you, Rascal Flatts' best song ever for weddings. That was my husband's song to dance with my daughter. But my wish for you today is that you walk away with insights, ideas, and tips. So I'm very biased towards action, right? So while we are going to increase our awareness, I am going to stretch your comfort zone and encourage you and invite you to try some of these things too, because that's how we learn and grow. But deepening our awareness of some of the cultural differences and how they might show up in coaching, how to approach some of those cultural conversations, bridging the cultural gaps, and then walking away with some things that you can try. So an experiment. So I'm going to introduce myself in a different way because Becky's like, do you want me to read your bio? I'm like, no, these are grown-ups. They probably already read the bio in the invitation, right? They can read my LinkedIn, and the About Me section of the LinkedIn is my speaker bio because I speak so much. That way I'm not scrambling at the last minute to find my speaker bio. I just tell them to cut, copy, and paste from the About Me section. But the welcome mat tool is it was my secret weapon when I launched my business 4 years ago because COVID hit in January. Like I opened my business in January 2020 after 30 years of working in corporate as an internal coach and diversity leader. And I'm like, 2020, this is a great year to double down and launch a business. I'm a round numbers kind of girl. After 30 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers, this is the time to launch my business. And then March hit, and everybody had to, all my consulting and coaching clients were like, you can't come visit us anymore. So I needed to figure out a way. How are you going to grow your coaching and consulting business and speaking business when they don't even let you in the door? So I created this welcome mat tool mainly because at PricewaterhouseCoopers as a consultant, they always did these placemats, and they're like, you got to take complex concepts and put it in a page. So they called them placemats. And I renamed mine a welcome mat because it signaled to people what they were welcome to talk to me about. Because I'm very conscious of unconscious bias. So if I show up on a Zoom screen like this, all they see is two-dimensional Lisa Ong, Asian woman with glasses. They don't really know too much about me. So the welcome mat tool gives me an opportunity as an introvert to talk about a slide about myself, which feels much easier than to talk about myself. And then it also allows me to weave in some story aspects about how culture and identity has shaped my core values, how I see the world, and how it impacts and how I show up. That way my clients go, oh, she may not be the loudest person in the room, right? But she still has something important to say. So let me walk you through the welcome mat. Okay, whoa, that's a lot. So you can pretty much tell I have glasses on. I am almost legally blind without them. These are no line bifocals. So in all of my slides, all the font is like usually 16 point or 24 point. People are like, oh, we love your slides from the back of the room. We can read them. I was like, that's because I can't see if they're not that big. Right? And I'm a visual learner, so colors are really important to me. And I'm grateful that all of you are turning your cameras on that you can when you can, because I can see your faces, and it makes it so much easier for me to talk to you. I'm not an artist, so I encourage my clients that are very creative and artistic to draw their welcome mat, right? When you draw, it unleashes a different side of your mind. But since I can't draw, I just cut and paste. So what starts in the center of your welcome mat is what centers and grounds you, which is my family. But I'm third generation Chinese American. My grandparents were the first to arrive in the US, right? They were born in Brooklyn, New York. My parents were second, I was third. And people are like, oh, so that's why you talk funny. It's like, my parents spoke English when I was growing up because they didn't want us to have an accent. But when they got angry and started fighting, they would switch to Chinese. So sometimes when I get anxious or angry, you'll hear a Brooklyn accent, but very rarely will you hear a Chinese accent because they never taught us how to speak Chinese, unfortunately, or I'd make a lot more money now because they didn't want us to know what they were arguing about. It's like cultural fluency, ouch, right? But we knew they were arguing. They just switched from English to Chinese. The other piece of your welcome mat, I say what centers and grounds you is my family, but you'll notice it spreads out. When I say family in the Asian culture, it's not just your core family. So it's not just my daughter, my husband, and my son-in-law, right? And he hates that picture. He keeps telling me, you need to switch it out. I'm like, no one's looking at you. but, but it's my extended family. So our family vacations are, my parents are both retired. And my dad plans a week-long vacation for the entire family. He emails the three daughters and says, make sure your whole family comes. And he pays for it. So that sure helps everybody wanting to come. But it's important to him now that he's 83 that we spend as much time together as possible, especially as the children go off to college. It's really hard to spend quality time together. But family is what centers and grounds me. So that's why it's all over the center of my placemat or welcome mat. But also when I say family, I'm not thinking just my extended family, I'm thinking generations. So this picture, the blurry picture, it's one of the only pictures we have of my mother-in-law's family in her village in China when she was a little girl. They had to flee China to Taiwan because the communists were taking over. So we don't have a lot of family treasures because they had to flee. But it reminds me when I'm having a tough day, it's like you didn't have to flee a country with the clothes on your back, right? Perspective. The stuff on the right-hand side, I always ask people, fill it up with, what do you love to do? Right. And I keep it open-ended. What do you love to do? Because when people talk about the things on the upper right-hand side, it's all very energizing for them. Because if you're going to work all day, the things you do outside of work are the things you're prioritizing because you like to live your strengths and it gives you joy. So I love to invest in professional associations. My father was big on education, so you had to go to the highest of your profession. So if you're going to be an accountant, you had to be a CPA. If you're going to be an executive coach, and he still is on my case to get my MCC, like, gosh, Dad, I just went from ACC to PCC. He's like, you're still not at the highest of your profession. It's like, yes, Dad. Right? But getting involved in professional associations as well as other organizations where I can immerse myself in the stories of learning through other people's shared experiences. So if I'm going to say I'm a belonging expert, I try to join organizations where I might be the only one and be a little different so that I can kind of put myself in their shoes. Now someone's like, hey, you're barging in when you join the National Society of Black CPAs. I'm like, no, their mission is lifting up and encouraging more Blacks in the profession. So as long as you pay your dues and volunteer your time, you're in. Right. Because the first couple of meetings I showed up, they looked around and they're like, does she know this is the Black Society of CPAs? And I would just joke with them and say, yes, I'm here to increase the number of Black CPAs. Is that what you said you wanted to do? It's like a lot of my coaching clients are from that community, and how can I get them plugged in with you? The left-hand side of the placemat's more historical. Where did you work? Where did you go to school? Right? Because we're all, our whole way of being is impacted by our lived experiences, what we've been exposed to in our education. And I do encourage my clients when they're putting these welcome mats together, only put the things that you want people to talk to you about. So particularly for some of my male clients that are engineers and accountants, they're like, this is too vulnerable, Lisa. This is like Brene Brown stuff. Like, what do I feel? I don't want to do that. I just think. I'm like, fine, just put what you want to talk about on it. It could be your favorite sports team, your favorite rock and roll songs, whatever it is. But the important point is they're welcome to connect with you at a deeper level, right? But the part that is very helpful, particularly with some of the cross-cultural coaching that I do is I also encourage them to put one item that's a highlight or an achievement from their early childhood, which is my Girl Scout Gold Award, and then one achievement or two more recently in their career that they're particularly proud of, right? That was the Dallas 500 listing. It's a directory of the 500 most powerful and influential leaders in Dallas Fort Worth, right? I was so proud the first time I made the list in 2020. And I told my mom, and she's like looking at the cover. She goes, "But you're not on the cover." It's like, "Mom, I'm in the top 500." She's like, so the fourth time I was nominated last year, she said, "You're still not on the cover." It's like, oh my goodness, never good enough. And then the Visionaries of the Year, the reason I put that award on there, not because we won, but because I achieved a goal I didn't think I'd ever do. So, and this is very helpful for me as a coach to follow my own advice. So I always encourage my coaching clients to go for stretch goals and go for something scary or something you think you're going to suck at least once a year to really build your skills and get out of your comfort zone. So when the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society asked me to lead a team for their Visionaries of the Year campaign, my very first question was, I'm a couch potato, so do I need to run, walk, climb stairs, ride a bike? I'm like, I'm not your person, right? I'm not an outdoors person. And they said, no, the Visionaries of the Year campaign, we're looking for storytellers. We're looking for people who can engage their social media following by telling the stories about the importance of the work that the Leukemia Society is doing to fight blood cancers. So all you have to do, Lisa, is raise $50,000 in 10 weeks. I was like, I'm not a crazy rich Asian. You got me confused. I don't know if I can do this. They said, you're a learner and you said that you like to do something new every year. So we'll give you a campaign manager assigned to help you and teach you everything you need to know about running a philanthropy campaign. I was like, they read my LinkedIn profile. It says I'm a learner, but it's like responsibility, focus, and belief are my top three strengths, and then continuous learning and connection. I was like, they totally busted me, right? Somebody read that and said, oh, Lisa, you have deep sense of responsibility. You pray that you can get it done, and you love connecting and learning, right? But it helped draw on my strengths because they asked me to do something that was within my wheelhouse. So we raised $56,000. We did more than what we thought we could do. And that's what I encourage as we think about what's holding our clients back from a cross-cultural lens in the Asian community. My parents always told us, do hard work, put your head down, right? Be humble, right? Don't try to say I'm all that, right? Don't try to be the most powerful person in DFW. But I explained to my father, it says powerful and influential. So influential can also be powerful, but in a different way. I like to say lions don't need to roar, right? So as what's the impact that we're having? And there's different ways to show up with influence and impact. Now, the reason I only gave you a few stories, I could be here forever. I encourage my teams to create these welcome mats, put them in a shared drive, and as different people come on board, to let them have a view of that, because as they're meeting their teammates in a virtual hybrid environment, they don't have the office clues anymore. And the new people are always the ones that are asked to introduce themselves and have a hard time connecting with their colleagues that are intact teams that have been together for a long time. So if we tell them everyone on our team creates a welcome mat, here's how you build one, then whoever onboards them shares their welcome mat, gives them some ideas, lets them put it together, and then they introduce themselves to the team that way, then it instantly builds multiple levels of connection where they can connect and say, I'd love to follow up with you and learn more about your welcome mat. So that's just one tool that I'm offering to you, because when we think about cross-cultural lens, sometimes we get stuck on race or gender or think a country, versus culture is much more than that. And you'll notice, I always like to use this diversity wheel as a starting point. It was developed by Gordon Schwartz and Roll Rowe, but I like it because I'm a visual learner, but it's like a kaleidoscope, right? You can zoom in and zoom out, but it basically says all of us are diverse. We all start with personality, right? I'm an introvert. As I told the stories of my welcome mat, I purposely picked things from each layer of the diversity wheel, right? Primary dimensions of diversity, secondary dimensions of diversity, right? Where I grew up, You saw where I went to school, right? We talked about language and family and some of our traditions, right? You saw that I was married. Most people lead with organizational dimensions of diversity. Where do I work? What department? How long I've been here, right? But then when you layer in the cultural piece, it gets really complicated because a lot of the cultural pieces are less visible, or they may be showing up in a behavior that we're not used to seeing, right? Maybe their concept of how they use their body language, their concept of authority, right? I was taught to respect my elders. So in the business environment, I didn't speak up if they were older than me or they had a senior title. And someone pulled me aside. They're like, Lisa, in the consulting world, if you sit in a meeting and you don't talk, they think you don't understand English. Like, or they're wondering, why are you sitting in here charging hours to my account, right? Billable hours. They're like, if you're in the room, you need to speak. Right? I'm like, well, I didn't think it was my turn to speak. I always deferred to the more senior person in the room. That's how I was raised. So I'm like, they said, well, just speak up. I'm like, that's not easy for someone who's not used to interjecting in a meeting, right? I'm used to waiting my turn and being called on. Right? And my boss noticed I was struggling because I would raise my hand. And he's like, this is not school. I'm not going to have you call on you every time you raise your hand. And I said, well, I'm really having trouble speaking up in these meetings because it was all men and they talk over one another. And I was like, I never learned how to interrupt. Right. And so my boss is like, made me watch improv. Whose line is it anyway? Like, I don't watch a lot of TV. He's like, watch this. Watch how they cut each other off in improv. He's like, one of the best tools they use is called the yes and technique. He's like, Lisa, you are a people pleaser. You say yes all the time. So this should be easy for you to do. Say yes when you want to cut in, kind of stand up or nod your head or say, I want to have something to add. And then say yes and then just pivot it to whatever you want to talk about. It's like, oh, thank you. But it was such helpful feedback because he was tailoring it to my cultural values of respect. And he's seen the behaviors I was struggling to do. And he was able to give me something to almost gamify it so that it wasn't me, it was how I was choosing to show up. He's like, in the first 10 minutes, I need you to speak. I'm like, okay, that's very, very specific feedback. He goes, and it doesn't have to be mind blowing. It can simply be, yes, that was a good idea. He goes, going back to yes, and I was like, wow, thank you so much. But that's how we think about coaching and mentoring across the differences, meet them where they are. And this diversity wheel is just a starting point. It doesn't have neurodiversity, cognitive thinking styles, communication style differences, right? It's just a starting point. So a self-reflection moment for the group. And I think I can switch over to the chat, make sure I've seen any questions here. Okay. Oh, great. I'm glad you like the welcome mat and wishing out loud so far. So I threw a lot at you, but I was purposely demonstrating the welcome mat, right? What did you hear that resonated with you? Right? What stories might you share in the future? You're welcome to come off mute or use your chat. Has it sparked some ideas about how you might share some different stories with your clients so they can get to know you at a different level? Or is it like, whoa, TMI? I don't know if I'd be comfortable sharing that much.
I loved the visual of it and I took 100 notes. So I like how you put it into different sections. So you start at the middle and that's the center of who I am. And even if you couldn't get through all of that, it's like at a glance, we could see what was important to you to be able to kind of connect a little bit deeper. So I really liked that part of it.
Thanks, Becky. And I know your family is important to you, so I probably would expect to see pictures of your family in the center too.
Mm-hmm.
And Mariana's highlighted, she liked the idea of adding the belonging question from the beginning into my intake form and discovery session.
Thank you. All right, we're going to keep moving because I got so much information and then we can always backtrack. So, you know, I remember when they rolled out DEI to some of the ICF chapters, there was a lot of pushback, like, why do we need to do this? We already do this all the time. And I wanted to just double check because people didn't really understand the word equity. They thought equity and equality was the same thing and they used them interchangeably. And so I like to describe myself as a talent gardener because I love flowers. And but really, what we do as a coach is growing talent. Right, the recruiters bring them in, and we grow them up. Right, and I was an internal coach before I became an external coach. So the reason I love this talent gardening slide using flowers analogies is it's better than the other graphic that everybody uses, which is the baseball analogy with the kids standing on the boxes looking into the infield. Like that is not belonging because even when you adjust the boxes, they're still in the outfield, right? So an equity lens says, why are we blaming that navy blue flower for stretching and struggling to get to the sunshine? Right? They gave them equal sized pots and they wondered why that navy blue flower was struggling. But if we're using an equity lens, we said, what would it take for each flower to be able to get equal access to the sunshine? It takes some extra effort to zoom out and go, here's what the navy blue flower needs. Right. And now, as people are starting to really get into how do I enhance my equity lens, they're like, why are we blaming the flowers at all for struggling to get to the sunshine? The true barrier to inclusion here and equal access is the blinds. So you're starting to see more and more companies and organizations look for the physical barriers to inclusion and removing them. Right? What are the systemic things that we're seeing in policies and procedures that we've been doing for years that we just never realized was excluding people? Right? Simple things like always putting our registration links on a platform that perhaps diverse communities can't access, right? Or they don't have our language, we're doing all of our videos with no closed captioning, right? How can the hard of hearing community ever join us? They can't hear our stuff. And then inclusion, right, is I always like to say we focus on the culture of inclusion in the soil, right? Because why are we keeping everyone in separate silos and separate pots? Because anyone who's grown flowers knows they get root bound and that stymies the growth. You have to transplant it to a bigger pot if they want to thrive. So if we really focus on the soil, right, and the culture of inclusion, we can get them out of the separate pots and bring them together. Now, someone's like, well, why do we even need the belonging piece, Lisa? We're all inclusive, right? If we do just inclusion, we'll be fine. I'm like, true, but just because you included someone doesn't mean that they actually feel like they belong. You may have included them and they may feel like they're tolerated, right? Maybe they've been included, but you're still forgetting that they're vegetarian and keep ordering barbecue at every meeting, right? I feel like I'm the only one in the North Texas chapter who always says, "What about the vegetarians?" And they're like, "Are you vegetarian?" I'm like, "No, but I'm just inclusive." Right? Hey, it's Ramadan. Maybe we can move the meeting to outside of Ramadan because our colleagues are fasting right now. They're like, oh, right. Those small things signal to people that you're welcome and you do belong. So it just takes extra effort to develop the belonging, right? Recognizing that everyone's going to show up a little different. And it's it's harder to do that. Some people really, I laughed. They're like, well, DEI is outlawed in Texas. I was like, last time I checked, right, making people feel welcome, respected, and loved never goes out of style. Let's see. The 5 steps that I always people ask me, what can you do? I'm an accountant and I love acronyms and mnemonics to remember things. So I say there's 5 things that each of us can do to promote a culture of inclusion. We always start with ourselves, right? Educate ourselves and explore our biases. We all have them or we wouldn't be alive because we're humans and we have brains and our brains are hardwired for bias to help us survive. Right? We're biased against pain. That's why we don't touch a stove or someone aims a gun in our face, we're going to run. Right? That's a bias against being killed. We act intentionally to include. Someone's like, that's a mouthful. I was like, well, that's a nice way of saying stop blissfully excluding people, right? Stop being blissfully unaware. Um, are you acting intentionally in every moment and every space, looking around, seeing, is there someone who cannot fully participate? Is there someone who may be feeling lost, lonely, or stuck, right? Are there barriers to inclusion here, physical or systematic otherwise, right? And then how do we learn how to commit to challenge bias and assumptions? Everyone's like, of course, if I hear something cringy, I'll say something, right? I was like, yeah, that sounds good, but that's why John Quinones' What Would You Do, his television show, is so popular because he puts those scenarios on there and then he looks to see if an everyday person would speak up. And we would like to think we would. But in the moment, if we're not prepared, we're silent and then people assume we agree. So I put the H in there to humbly lead with integrity and heart because we are all human and we're not perfect and we're going to make mistakes. And the CEOs that hire me to work with them on this inclusive mindset stuff, they're like, okay, Lisa, tell me everything I need to say and not say so I don't mess up. And I'm like, you are going to mess up. I'm sorry. You can't pay me any amount of money. You're going to mess up. But as long as you come at it with care and let people know you're trying to do better, they'll meet you halfway. Right. But you better learn the art of a true apology. So don't say sorry you felt that way. Like, ouch, you're just going to gaslight them even more. Right. Just say, I'm sorry about my impact. Right. I will do better next time. And then most of my CEOs can't remember EACH. So that's why I gave them the fifth, which is just listen, learn, and lead with TLC. And I define TLC as transparency, leadership by example, and caring. Right. And so when something goes bad in the news, they'll call me and they'll say, Lisa, what should we do? I'm like, what do I always say? Right. Listen, learn, then lead with TLC, because listening is an action. And they're very biased towards action. And I want to see it, shoot it, bag it. I'm like, this is not skeet shooting. This is not duck hunting. Right. I need you to listen, learn, then lead. Right. Before you come in to save the day as the ally, how do you know that's what they really want from you? Why can't you sit back and say, I'm going to have a listening session? Please join me. I want to hear how you're feeling and what you want me to hear and learn from. That takes more courage than just trying to come in and solve it. The commitment to ICF coaching values, I just put them in here so you can reference and see how they've embedded it. I loved it when I saw it. I was like, this is what we do in terms of understanding the needs of others and getting curious about what might they need in terms of extra special effort to get equal access to the sunshine, right? Are we making sure there are no barriers to inclusion? And so I was like, I love that it's embedded in our core values. But even more importantly, I love that it's embedded in our coaching competencies as new coaches come on board and as our existing coaches continue to renew their licenses, right? It's embedded in our ethical presence to be ethical. We're being sensitive to our client's identity, right? I have CEOs that yell at me when I get on Zoom or Teams and they're like, why do you have she, her on there? I know you're a she, her. I'm like, because I'm welcoming other people to share their preferred pronouns with me, right? How do they like to identify? Because I don't want to make a mistake. It's just one way for me to signal I'm curious. It doesn't mean it's you the only way, right? I said it's just one way. And he's like, oh, okay. I said identity of preferred names is important. He said, why? I said, because if you like me to call you Joe all the time and your legal name's Joseph, you'll get annoyed if I keep calling you Joseph after you've already told me to call you Joe. He's like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't feel like you respect me when you keep calling me Joseph. It's like, well, that's my cultural value. My parents always said stick with legal names until they tell you otherwise. And actually, culturally, we were always taught to tell anyone senior than us was an auntie or uncle or Mr. and Mrs. So when I started in public accounting in Texas, everyone was yes, ma'am, yes, sir. And they're like, you're an adult. You don't need to say that anymore. Right. But it was so deeply ingrained in me to say yes, ma'am, yes, sir. It's like, yes, Mr. Todd. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Like, just call me Todd. I was like, ooh, calling people by their first names alone was awkward. Right? Embodies a coaching mindset. Curious and open. And then the other piece of the core competencies is that what we already mentioned, the psychological safety for them to be able to share who they are, what they believe with no judgment. Right? It's okay. I always tell people we can be different and we can agree not to agree. We don't have to agree on everything, but what we can do is agree to be kind. Right? I'll listen to what you have to say. I may not believe it, right? I may think, oh my gosh, how can you believe that? Right? But I've got to quiet the judgy voice and say, what is in their lived experience, their education, what they've been exposed to that might be leading them to believe that? And if that's their world, then how do I coach them from that world? And it takes a lot to separate ourselves from our judgy voice in our head because we're coming at it from our lens of the world. I'm going to throw some self-reflection questions at you, right? As we looked at the core values and coaching competencies, right? There's always some that we can develop more. And then curiosity around how my cultural lens, the way I was raised and grown up, how is that potentially influencing my coaching? Checking to make sure I caught everything. So that was a pause. Okay. So all coaches, ideally, if we're creating psychological safety, are holding space for them to be authentic, right? And also bring their strengths to their best. So I always tell people they beat up a lot of the people I'm coaching from other cultures. They always show up at their calls wanting to work on something to do better. Like, I'm terrible at this or I'm terrible at that. I need to fix this. And it's interesting when I say, can we start the call with what are we celebrating today? They're like, no, no, no. I'm to do oriented. I'm task oriented. I'm moving to next. Like, I'm paying you to help me solve my problems. And I'm like, I'm also trying to get you comfortable tooting your own horn. Because if you're not comfortable tooting your own horn to me about what you've achieved and what you've celebrated, what your success and impact has have been between our calls, how can I expect that you're doing that with your superiors and those you're wishing out loud to for new stretch opportunities? Right. They're like, oh, right. I'm a person that just moves on and I'm never good enough and I'm keeping moving to the next goal. It's like sometimes we have to pause and have our coaches hold up that mirror to our greatness and say it's okay to look in the mirror and shine a little bit, right? And for some cultures, that whole cultural humility and being humble is hard to be under the spotlight when they do a good job. So as coaches, how are we creating that space for them to celebrate what they do best? In sharing stories, I have learned this framework that I found really helpful, and a lot of my clients feel helpful, especially my executives who are showing up on panels and they're supposed to share stories of their experiences because they're sharing their experience from their cultural lens of the world. It tends to be a little bit, how can I say this? They have some blind spots to their economic privilege. So they'll share a story about the country club or their vacation or, growing up and going to summer camp and horseback riding every year. Not that that's bad, but sometimes it's not a story that would resonate with the entire group. So when they're sharing stories to build bridges of understanding, I try to give them a framework to say, think of who your audience is, think about what they need to hear from you. And then when you share the stories, use the simple framework of, I feel this, right? I've felt this, and I found that this worked for me. By sharing the feel, the felt, and the found, you're connecting with them with where they are. So I have felt like I feel like I don't belong sometimes and I'm out of my league. Right? When I first joined the ICF, right, I felt like there's nobody here that looks like me. All of these coaches are way more experienced than me. I'm just an internal coach. Maybe I don't belong. But what I found was by telling people, hey, I'm an internal coach, I'm new at this, I'm a little nervous. What I found was people would meet me where I was and they took me under their wings, but I had to have the vulnerability to let people know where I was so that they could meet me halfway. They didn't understand that cultural barrier of, for me as an Asian American, we never asked for help. Like only the dumb kids raise their hand in class, right? My parents always said you're smart enough to figure it out yourself. So asking for help was really hard. Whereas other cultures are like, we ask for help all the time. Shoot, we ask for help on Siri all the time, right? Hey Siri, can I blah, blah, blah. But if you grew up in a culture where you're not used to asking for help, that's not always apparent and easily done. And my coach pointed that out to me and she said, the people that move fastest in their career, Lisa, are those that are not afraid to ask for help. I'm like, oh, I'm going to struggle with this one. And I told her the cultural barrier. She says, well, here, let's play to your cultural strength. I said, what do you mean? She said, you told me you respect hierarchy in your elders. Like, yes. So you value wisdom. Of course. So just go ask people for advice. You're showing them respect. And guess what? When you ask for their advice or you'd like to get their input as a sounding board, guess what? You're now getting help. It's like, ah, love that reframe. So now I just run around asking people for advice and sounding board. I'm still getting the help, but that word help was a barrier for me. The same thing about the cultural norms around networking. Right, I got passed over for promotion my third year with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I thought I was on fast track for promotion because I was a returning intern. If you were a returning intern, you had a years of extra experience that no one else did, and usually returning interns got fast tracked to promotion to supervisor, or what they call senior associate. I was the only one in my class that didn't get start class that didn't get promoted that year. I almost quit. I was so devastated. It's like, hey, this is not fair. I thought I did everything. I followed the syllabus to get an A. Like, you gave me here's all the things in your job, right? Client hours, right? Being a team player, all of that. What I missed was the social skills, all of the other unwritten rules and how to navigate office politics. So they said, Lisa, when we had 4 promotion spots and 5 of the returning interns, we thought you were happy where you were. Well, I'm very unhappy that I didn't get promoted, right? But because I wasn't signaling to people that I was expecting to get promoted, right? Where was that on the cheat sheet? I didn't know, right? In the culture that says you need to brag a little bit when you're not used to bragging, you have no idea that that's why you're not going to get promoted, right? And how do you reframe bragging is simply showcasing your talent so other people can put you in a position to have greater impact that's serving and helping others. It's like, oh, thank goodness I had a coach that could translate that for me and into a way that was relevant for my cultural values. So you'll start to notice when you're coaching, if there's a certain behavior that's blocking your client, you might start to see these culture patterns. And I want to give you a tool called culture patterns. It's roughly based on Hofstede, who's a social psychologist. He did a lot of studies on cultures. Whoops. And so it's a way to look at cultures across behaviors and how they view things. So some cultures see things when you say self sense of time and space. So when I go to Latino events, my coach told me to loosen up my shoulders and stuff because there's a lot of huggers in that group, right? He's like, if you move, you might get kissed on the lips. I was like, what? I'm shaking hands with people. That's about as much touching as I'm used to doing in my culture. We're very formal. And he's like, oh no, you're like part of the mi familia. We're gonna hug you and we're gonna kiss you on both cheeks. I was like, okay, right? Cultural difference, but I would just loosen up and go in. It was so much fun. Dress and appearance. Some people tend to dress more formally because they associate name brands with status. So you'll notice the Asians from Hong Kong or who are very wealthy in Asia carry a lot of name brands, right? And people didn't realize that it's because of the status piece, but others just dress for comfort. Um, Mental processes and learning styles. Some cultures are more linear and some are more all over the place. Knowing where your preferred end of the culture is and it's on a continuum makes a big difference because then you can understand when someone's coming at it differently. So working habits and practices in the Asian culture, it's about the long term, it's dynasties, right? It's families, it's relationships. So if we start to do business with an Asian owned business and we don't have dinner first in a 10-course meal and get to know who they are and their family, and we jump straight to a timed agenda, they think it's rude, right? And I had one client, they use timed agendas for all their clients because they're very efficient, right? But if you're meeting an Asian client who's like, wow, this is rude, like they haven't even said, how are you? How's your family? How's your mother? Right? It's going to come across very different. And the same with the relationships and friends, like I shared on my welcome mat. When I say family, people know it's my extended family, not just my nuclear family of my husband, daughter, and son in law. Sense of time. You see this all the time in different corporate meetings. Some individuals are very fixed about time and some are not, or time-ish. Same with food. Some people live for food and some people eat when they're hungry. And you'll start to see these differences in your coaching experiences. And then the same with emotions. I was taught to mask my emotions, don't act like a fool, don't show anger, and definitely don't cry. So when I came home in kindergarten and tell my mom that this kid was teasing me on the playground and making fun of my eyes, and I cried, she yelled at me. It's like, whoa. So if other kids came home and cried, they'd get a hug and like, it's going to be okay. My mom yelled at me. She's like, never show tears. That shows weakness. They're just going to pick on you more. It's like, whoa. Right. Well, how's that show up when I have my daughter? Every time she fell, we were just like, you're not bleeding. Get up. You're good. Right. Because the minute you say, are you okay? She'll start bawling. But what we don't realize is how much of that cultural values gets embedded in their heads. So unfortunately, on my parent-teacher conference, they said, your child's not empathetic. I'm like, what do you mean? She sees other children fall. She's like, you're not bleeding. Get up. You're fine. I'm like, oh, shoot. I was like, I didn't really realize that. I was like, oops, I got to tell her that's not okay to say to other kids. And then the same thing with leadership orientation. This comes up in self-performance reviews. Some cultures are focused on everyone else versus themselves. So my self-performance reviews were always, we did this, we did that, I supported this. And my coach had to say, you got to get comfortable saying I led, I contributed, I drove, right? It's more not we, but me, which is the opposite of Sheryl Sandberg's book. And then, like we talked about, cultural humility requires continuous learning and admitting we don't have all the answers. So I admit I don't have all the answers. I'm still learning too. So if I've said something that was offensive to you or looked like I missed a point, I'm always open to feedback because that's how I learn and grow. The other thing is I purposely look to think about the areas on that wheel that I don't know about and try to immerse myself in getting to know more people in that community. The more people you can pull into your network through the power of their stories really helps. One of the people in my lunch group is deaf. And so I've learned to be much more inclusive to the deaf community. He tells me all the different things he needs to feel like he's included. Like I didn't know where he's sitting makes a difference, but he reads lips. So he's like, I need my back to the light. So the light is always on the faces of other people. Because if it's the other side, guess what? They look like witness protection because the light's behind them and I can't read their lips. These are things I would never think of. Right? So I'm so grateful for his friendship. And these are the resources I promised to share with you. Oops. You'll get the list. I always listen to podcasts because it gives you a chance to listen into stories you wouldn't normally hear. I don't have to walk up to someone and say, tell me what your experience like as a Black professional, right? I listen to Brown Table Talk. It's one of LinkedIn Top Voices podcasts. DC Marshall and Meeta Malik talk about what it's like to be a Black professional and an Indian South Asian professional, right? And some of these other ones talk about the barriers and overcoming them too. I'm a big on LinkedIn. I'm always looking for LinkedIn top voices and I follow the hashtags because I'm lazy and it just forwards all the information about what they're reading in my feed every morning, right? And then websites. If you're into videos, Outsmarting Human Minds has really short videos that are great thought provokers. And then they also have podcast. It's based on Harvard, so there's a bias. It's like, oh, Harvard, it must be good. But it was developed by Dr. Manaji, and she's the author of Blind Spots, The Hidden Biases of Good People. But she created this website so you can take the implicit association test. All the resources are there, but it's all based on the brain science. So anyone who's into neuroscience, I guess you're going to hear from Ann Betts later. Like that's her thing, right? And then Marsha Reynolds also talks a lot of this stuff. You've got some really big name speakers. I'm honored to be speaking to you today after hearing who else you have. Leanin.org and Catalyst.org have a lot of great gender resources for free. So you can just play the videos and they come with workbooks. ICF Global, which you already talked about, has been uploading a lot of things and their community of practice for DEIB is great. I've joined some of their monthly calls. Then you can always follow me and sign up for my MailChimp blog. And then also Coaches of Color and Culture. So I try to build my relationship with other coaches of different backgrounds so that if someone comes to me and says, Lisa, do you know a coach that speaks Spanish? Like, yes, I do. Lisa, do you know a coach that speaks Portuguese? Yes, I do. Right. So it really helps by joining Coaches of Color and Culture. They're open to everyone to build your network of other coaches in the space. And then in summary, right, hopefully I loaded you up with identity, strengths, and who am I stories, a welcome mat, origin stories, right, bridging cultural differences through meaningful connections, diversity wheels, culture patterns, right, thinking about what would it take to create psychological safety for them to belong, right, and it takes compassion and courage and curiosity to always seek that feedback. And as coaches, we're naturally equipped to hold spaces for belonging. We just have to be very intentional about it. So sharing is caring. I want to do a quick time check, Becky. Right, is there any, if everyone wants to drop into the chat since you're saving the chat, any resources that you found helpful to learn about other cultures, like a website, newsletter, podcast, influencer, movies, or books? This is actually a question I ask at my quarterly lunch meetup groups every quarter. And I love getting the recommendations because I don't watch TV that much, right? But when I do, I want to make sure it's a good one. So someone recommended last week at lunch Ava DuVernay's movie Origin. They said, "Oh, Lisa, you have to see that." I was like, "Okay," right? Then there's all these. I already shared some websites and podcasts, but any other movies that you have found particularly helpful or books? I don't know. Some people don't have time for books, so I do newsletters too.
I just got the culture map. Have you read that?
No.
I don't know if you're, but I haven't read it, so I can't, but I've had several people
Recommend it to you.
recommend it to me, so I'll drop it in the
Oh,
chat.
yes.
I haven't read it yet, so I can't say like, oh, it's amazing, but I've had a few people recommend it to me as just really insightful. We just in a mentoring group I was in literally on Monday, we talked about Hofstede's model. So I love that you brought that up. And then someone in that group recommended this book. Anyway, I'll put it in the chat.
I'm going back to the chat now too. Yes. Thank you, Mariana. For neurodivergent, it's a less obvious dimension of diversity. And sometimes we can do more inclusive things that help everyone, whether we know if they're identifying as neurodivergent or not. So one of my clients, they automatically not only default their video conferencing to allow for closed captions automatically, they also set up the AI SourceScribe or Otter AI to take the notes for the meeting so that everyone gets copied on the notes. That way it never puts somebody in an awkward spot of declining to take the notes because they may have ADHD or dyslexia. And so the boss says, it's your turn to take notes, Jen. And you're like, oh, I don't want to tell everyone. Right. But by simply delegating to AI to take the notes, everyone gets equal access to the notes. Now, the scary thing about AI, if you've not used SourceScribe, it's kind of neat from an inclusion perspective because it also measures who talks for how long. So if we had it on right now, it's like Lisa Ong is talking 95% of the time, right? And it tells you what percentage each person's talking, but it helps, particularly for my CEOs who need to elevate the women's voices on their senior teams, to notice that, oh my gosh, the men are dominating this call, right? And it also measures sentiment. So it's getting good enough to listen in on the words you say, but your facial recognition. So it's like Lisa showed up as neutral on this call, or Lisa showed up as excited, or, Sandy is looking a little curious or concerned, right? She never said a word, but she looked concerned. So I've been studying AI because I really do think that coaches who don't study AI might get left behind. I don't think it's going to take our jobs, but it does going to help us be even better at our jobs. MarshallGoldsmith.ai, if you haven't checked it out, is fabulous. So Marshall uploaded all of his books into his own private chat bot. So anytime you have coaching questions, go to MarshallGoldsmith.ai and type the questions in. It's amazing. It sounds just like him. Let's see. Strength space versus deficit base. Yeah, it's hard for us to I agree. Let's see, what are these others? Yes, cultural norms across cultures. Thank you. Actually, there's a book called The Values Compass. I just came across that one the other day. The woman visited like 50 different countries, and then she lived in each of those countries for several weeks, interviewed all the people, and then she boiled down the predominant value that she experienced from the people of that country. Like she said, Japan values cleanliness. She's like, you walk around the streets and you realize that's how they operate. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I thought if you're looking specifically for country values norms, that book's really neat because it's all storytelling. Oh, the values compass. Yep, there it is. Okay.
I'm fast and furiously as you're calling things out. I'm like, type it in just so it can be in the chat.
Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah.
So before we switch over to just open Q&A, I always encourage everyone, the power of wishing out loud. It's not rocket science, but I figured I better register it as my coaching trademark, right? Investing in relationships. But it's really about being bold when managing your moments. And I had this conversation with a bunch of working moms earlier this week for a mommy mentoring call, Mom's Business, right? They're always like worried about mom guilt, not spending enough time with their kids. And it's like, it's not the quantity of time, it's the quality of the time, right? And being fully present with them, right? And are the moments that you're hanging out with them the moments that matter? And I was like, you notice moments is spelled with M-O-M. So it's the moments that matter, right? But prioritizing your time. And then as coaches, we always take care of everyone else, but sometimes we just need to be that kind to ourselves as well. So I do encourage my coaching clients. I'm like, I could probably save you lots of hours of coaching. When you get stuck, right? Sit down and say, what advice would I give my beloved best friend if they were in my shoes? Write it all down and then go back and read it and say, why am I not following my own advice? Um, and then, it takes courage to be brave and keep wishing out loud, but not just for yourself. I think that when we wish out loud for others is when we are able to be more bold. So when I was a new mom returning from maternity leave and they did not have mother's rooms for nursing and pumping, I had to go to the main ladies' room and stretch the extension cord. It was so awkward. Finally, I'm like, this is too awkward. I'm going to spill the milk. Someone's going to trip over the cord. This is not safe. I went to the managing partner. I said, I wish we had a dedicated nursing room, right? All of our office space has glass windows and the doors don't lock, so it's hard to have privacy. And I was like, can we just have one room, even if it's a coat closet that's private and designated as the mother's room? He's like, sure. Why hasn't anyone ever asked that before? I said, well, it's kind of uncomfortable to come talk to you, a man, about our nursing needs. We're talking about like breast. And he just burst out laughing. But he said, that's an easy request. So how do we be brave and keep wishing out loud? So that's my contact information. I dropped my LinkedIn. That's the QR code to my LinkedIn. And I'm on LinkedIn every day. That's one of my business building things that I learned from the coaching mastermind, right? They were all into Facebook, but I'm not on Facebook because my clients are more corporations because I do leadership coaching and speaking. But having that presence is really important to be educational, informative, right? Encouraging, uplifting. And a little bit more entertaining. So yesterday I went to a conference and she was an expert in LinkedIn. She says, I follow you, Lisa, but it's all educational and informational, but it's not entertaining. And I was like, well, I thought that was Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, right? I have a business image. LinkedIn is business. She goes, but business does not have to be boring. She's like, you can let more of your personality come through because you're funny. And she's like, sometimes let loose on that. You'll notice your posts get more engagement when you do so. So I've started posting really bad selfies and silly pictures, and she was right. I'm going to hand it back to you guys or take some time for questions before I hand it back to you. But I'm hoping that you'll take away at least one thing today, if not two or three, to use in your coaching practice.
Yes. Anybody have anything that they'd like to share? Just one aha.
Does anyone already use a welcome mat when they introduce themselves when they speak?
Mm-mm.
I have one that's a little sort of ish. It was I was challenged to create my model for coaching. And so I used, image. It was part of a drawing class. So I drew it, but it's focused more on my coaching, my model for coaching versus me as a whole. And so I love your welcome mat idea.
Right, because Brene Brown always says who we are is how we lead.
Exactly.
Mhm. So good. Well, we thank you so much. To say thank you, I was going to do a little screenshot of our time together. We lost a few people, but that's okay. And so if you guys want to hit your reactions and say thank you to Lisa, but you're going to have to hold it for a second. So not before. Okay. Are we ready? I can't do two things at once. So I'm just going to be like, okay. All right. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I got too much going on over here. Drag and drop, screenshotting. Okay. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, that's fun. Okay. And I'm crazy. All right. Fabulous. That's so fun. Thank you for participating. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for being so willing to join the journey, right?
Yes, so good. It is such a good reminder that we do have biases, that there's other ways that we can unpack and get to know and connect with other people. So I'm excited to use some of these ideas in our next Coaches Connect call next month. And I guess I can, Carrie, do you want to finish it out for us?
Yeah, so I just put in the chat the link to our High Country event page and upcoming events. So in May, we have our regular monthly Coaches Connect. If you haven't been to one of those, it's really just an opportunity to share kind of what's on your mind. And that can be anything from like, I'm hitting a wall in my coaching, or I've just started my business, who's got tips and tricks of what you've done, anything to help support each other. So the idea is that really that connection, sharing things that we've learned, et cetera. And that happens the first Wednesday of every month. It's free for members. Would love to have you come. And then, as Lisa mentioned, we will be having Ann Betts join us in May for the Neuroscience and Coaching Ask Me Anything, which should be fantastic. And then one more thing to share with you, and that is we are going to be doing, and Jen talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but International Coaching Week, super excited for that. We will be doing 2 programs that week. So the first one with Marsha Reynolds, if you're not familiar with her, she was a former ICF, past ICF president. She's also the author of Coach the Person, Not the Problem, and her new book, yes, I'm a fan, Breakthrough Coaching. So she will come and kick us off that week. And then Jen Marr is going to be here to really dive into wellness with us, which is another anchoring point of coaching. So, and then the Coast to Coast Pro Bono Challenge, ICF High Country is a part of that. You're going to see some communication come out. We'll probably kick it off in LinkedIn and then spread it elsewhere. But if you want to be a part of that and offer pro bono time, and then we record it all together, and then they're going to map it across the world to see coast to coast how many ICF coaches shared and offered the gift of coaching to give people that chance to experiment with it. So if you are interested, please let me know. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. But you'll see me again, and you'll see me posting. So always check the ICF High Country LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook pages too, because we'll have it there. And what am I forgetting, Becky?
I'm just dropping in the chat the survey for today. And then hold tight, because I promised you I'd save the chat and drop that in the chat. So 1 second. Saving.
Yeah, don't forget to sign that survey, because that's what gets you the CCEUs. Yeah.
Is it just me, or is it sometimes I'm like, where did it put it?
So I'll tell you something silly. You know how you have all these certificates for the CCEUs? I used to put them all in a binder, and then every 3 years have to type them all in to renew. And I just realized this year when I had to recertify that in the learning portal, you can upload them anytime you want all year long and just hit save. It's like, oh my gosh, when did they do that? I'm like, I've been telling all the coaches now, just upload it every month, and then you just hit submit. It makes your life so much easier.
Anyone, any final thoughts? I think from us, we just want to thank each and every one of you, especially Lisa, but also all of you for coming, because this is what makes our monthly program so special, is just the connection time and the learning together. So thank you for being here, and we hope that we get to see you in May. Woo!
And someone from Idaho too. I was taking attendance from all your states, right? You had Montana and Utah and Nevada. And I was like, wait, what happened? And you had Dakotas, but you didn't have Idaho.
No, I don't think we had
We
Idaho.
usually have a lot from Idaho, so it just must not have worked out, because usually we have a ton from Boise here.
Montana is in the house today.
Must be an Idaho state holiday.
Yes. So thank you again. And we can stay a few minutes longer if anybody has any questions or feedback. We'd love to hear from you. I got the meeting chat notes in there. So you should have everything to register for everything and do your survey to get your certificates and connect with everybody. Hey, have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Becky and
Good
Carrie.
weekend.
Thank you.
Woo-hoo. Yay. Lisa, that was great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. This is so
Yeah.
neat to meet so many coaches. It's like I'm broadening my coaches' relationships west.
I have literally like 2 pages of notes.